Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and this is the Guilds of Ravnica Set review for Blue. So before I get into the blue color, I have a slight correction to make for the white, because these are kind of coming up chronologically. Venerated Loxodon, it doesn't become an 8/8. The counters, whenever you convoke, go on top of each creature that convoked it. I misread it. I thought it said for each creature that convoked it, like the +1/+1 counters going on the Loxodon. It's +1/+1 counters going on the creatures that are convoking it, which is fine, I guess. Not any better or worse than it is. It's still just a, an okay 4/4. But now it isn't a 8/8 now, which isn't, it's not a larger creature now. It's just something that pumps your entire board, which is fine, I guess. So there you go. Okay in Draft and Sealed, and probably all right in Standard. So let's move on to the blue cards here. Capture Sphere is the first card. It's like a Pokemon, basically. It's a 4-mana enchantment or a flash enchant creature. When the Capture Sphere enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. The enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So this is basically a removal spell for us at flash speed, which is very, very good in Draft and in Sealed. Basically, once they play their biggest bomb, you just play this and lock it down forever on their turn. 4 mana is probably okay with this. If it was 3 mana, probably would have been an uncommon. For Draft and Sealed, this is perfect. For Standard, not going to see any kind of play because it's too expensive. Next up, we've got Chemist's Insight. 4 mana instant, draw 2 cards with Jumpstart. This is the new mechanic for Izzet. This is the Jumpstart mechanic. You may cast this card from your graveyard by discarding a card, in addition to paying its other costs. Then exile this card. Basically, it's flashback, but discarding a card as well. This one is probably the best as far as it goes, as far as the Jumpstart cards go. I think there's only 10 in the Guilds of Ravnica set as a whole. Insight is the best one by a long shot because it draws you 2 cards and then can draw you 2 more cards later in the match, which is very good. Very good for control. Definitely going to see some standard play and some standard brewing around. For Draft and Sealed, getting to cast cards 2 times, like the same card twice in Draft and Sealed, is like a godsend. So this is definitely going to be a high draft pick for you in Draft and Sealed if you're in Izzet, or if you're in any other colors like a Dimir. So moving on, we've got City Watch Sphinx, a 6-mana 5/4 Sphinx flyer. When it dies, you surveil for 2. I thought it was enter the battlefield, but it's when it dies. Sphinx is very, very good. Great top-end bomb for you in Draft and Sealed. Not going to see any kind of play outside of that. Surveil is also a new mechanic for us. This is a Dimir mechanic. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Then you may put any number of them into your graveyard and the rest on the top of your library in any order. So kind of like Scry. Not necessarily Scry, but kind of like Scry. It's Scry that, like, if you don't want it on the top of your deck, you can put it into your graveyard, which is really nice, instead of putting it under, like, at the bottom of your deck. So gives you some actual leeway into using other mechanics within Guilds of Ravnica, as well as some nice graveyard shenanigans and turning on stuff like Jumpstart as well. So Sphinx is cool for that. Also just being a 6-mana 5/4 flyer, very good in Draft and Sealed, but again, not going to see any kind of standard play. Moving up, we've got Dazzling Lights. I love the art here. This is a 1 blue mana instant. Target creature gets -3, -0 until end of turn. Surveil for 2. For 1 mana, this card does so much. I'm really happy about this card. Really think it's very powerful for sure. I do think Surveil 2 for a 1 mana card is kind of insane, honestly, because it can feed so much. Can feed Jumpstart, can feed Undergrowth and green. We'll get to that eventually. But also -3, -0 is also very good as a combat trick. So this is a very high draft pick for me as far as a good combat trick and good card to put off on an opponent. Even like an instep, just weaken something on the other side of the field and then just Surveil for 2. I think that's very, very good. Love this card. Can't wait to play it in Draft and Sealed. Might even see standard play. Just 2 mana or 1 mana Surveil 2. I mean, at instant speed, that's almost that alone is probably good enough to see standard play. We'll see in brewing though, for sure. Next up, we've got Devious Cover-Up, a 4-mana instant common counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. You may shuffle up to 4 cards from your graveyard into your library. So this is going along with the Surveil mechanic, basically. Probably going to be really good in a Sultai deck where you have Undergrowth and Surveil kind of working together. It's a decent counter card in Draft and Sealed. 4 mana to counter something normally needs to have a really good upside. This card is okay as far as the upside goes. Probably not going to see any kind of like standard play. It could turn on like say you have a Jumpstart card in the graveyard, but you just want to cast it one more time from your library first. This is a good way to do that. Or if you have like a really big bomb that's in your graveyard, you can throw it back into your deck mid-game, late game. That's very interesting. I do like this card as far as a like mid-tier to low-tier pick for you if you're in a Dimir list or in a Izzet list in Draft and Sealed. But yeah, I don't think this will see any kind of standard play. Moving up, we've got Dimir Informant, a 3-mana 1/4 human rogue. When nears the battlefield, Surveil 2, another good card. And again, Surveil is basically Scribe, but you can throw stuff into your graveyard, so I really like Surveil. I think it's probably the most powerful out of all the mechanics as far as just straight value. This is also a 1/4 like defender almost. It's it can definitely attack in for sure, but it's only hitting in for 1. So the real goal here is to have this as a great blocker against any large creatures or small creatures against your opponent's board state. So like if they have mentor creatures coming in, the Informant can probably trade or get rid of them if they attack in. Really like this card a lot in our Dimir deck or an Izzet deck for sure. Probably not going to see any kind of standard play because it's too expensive for what you're trying to do here. But for Draft and Seal, this is just gravy. Moving up, we've got Disdainful Stroke. This is a great card coming back from us from, I think, Khans of Tarkir or Dragons of Tarkir, one of the Tarkir blocks. A 2-mana instant, counter target spell will convert a mana cost 4 or greater. Very good card, going to see standard play for sure against the mono green stompy decks. Galt is going to get counter to this time and time again. In Draft and Seal, this is probably really useful against the green decks and against the Convoke decks because of the high mana cost of those particular cards. Besides that, this is probably a card you want to sideboard most of the time against Boros, against Izzet, and maybe even against like a Dimir deck. But against like mono green or Golgari or something like that, Disdainful Stroke might be useful there, and maybe against the Selesnya deck in Draft and Sealed. So this is kind of a specific use card for Draft and Sealed, and I think it's probably going to be good in the sideboard and then bringing it in from sideboard into game 2. Yeah, and again, it's going to see lots of standard play for sure. Moving up here, we've got Dream Eater. This is a 6-mana 4/3 Nightmare Sphinx. It's also a Pokemon ability, if you guys knew that. With Flash Flying, and when it enters the battlefield, Surveil 4. When you do, you may return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So it's got Flash, it's going to bounce something, and you Surveil for 4, and it also is a flyer. This card is ridiculous. This is the definition of a bomb in Draft and Sealed. It's also a mythic, so you probably won't see it that much in Draft and Sealed, but if you do see it, it's going to be ridiculous against basically everything on their board today. It does have 3 toughness, so it is going to be able to die easily to a Boros like burn spell or something like that. But everything else it's giving you is ridiculous. Very, very good card. Love this for Draft and Sealed. Probably will be a maybe a top end in some like blue flyer deck in Standard as well. I think this card's going to be like tooled around with quite a bit in those formats too. Moving on here, though, we have Drowned Secrets. This was our preview card, if you guys knew that. A 2-mana enchantment. Whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So there's multiple decks this could go into in Standard. For Draft and Seal, this card's probably okay because if you're playing a Izzet or a Dimir deck, or maybe like a Sultai deck or something like that, if you're playing blue spells, this is naturally going towards milling your opponent out. And keep in mind, Draft and Sealed decks only have 40 cards limits, or 40 card minimums in people's decks, so being able to mill somebody out is actually more likely to happen in Draft and Sealed than it is to happen in Standard most of the time. But Drowned Catacombs is very good, partners very well with Psychic Corrosion and Murmuring Mystic. We'll talk about that later in this video. In Standard, and I think it's going to be good for that, as well as just being a good card to work with Nexus of Fate. Like you could mill yourself and then have Nexus of Fates in your deck and then just Nexus of Fate your opponent to death, and I think that's a legitimate strategy. So we'll see what happens there with Drowned Secrets here. Do think it's very good for Standard as far as like brewing around. I think it's a fun card for Draft and Sealed, and might see some modern and Eternal play with some more tooling around with maybe a Storm deck in Modern. Next up here we have Enhanced Surveillance, a 2-mana enchantment. You may look at it at an additional 2 cards each time you surveil. Exile Enhanced Surveillance, shuffle your graveyard into your library. This is probably really good for Draft and Sealed because Surveil can have the offset experience of like just milling you for like 2 or 3 every single turn. And that's not very good for a Draft and Sealed deck. So this is definitely in here to kind of like circumvent that situation where you mill yourself out by digging through your deck. So I think this is good for Draft and Sealed for that particular situation. But everywhere else, this just seems really bad. Maybe sideboard tech against mill or something like that. But besides that, just not really seeing this anywhere else. So probably just Draft and Sealed, and that's about it. Moving on here, we've got Guild Summon, a 3-mana enchantment, uncommon. When Guild Summon enters the battlefield, you may tap any number of untapped gates you control. Draw a card for each gate tapped this way. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So in Draft and Seal, this is probably where this is going to shine, drawing you maybe 1, 2, maybe even 3 cards in a single game. If you also have gates on the battlefield, it still does stuff, still draws you cards as well, which is interesting, basically making you tap out for it as well. But Not that powerful outside of Draft and Sealed. You could maybe build a Guild Gate deck in Standard, but probably just wouldn't be fast enough in there. This might be really good, though, in a Commander deck where there's lots of more Guild Gates to choose from, so maybe for that. Moving on up here, we've got Leapfrog. I love the art here. This is a 3-mana 3/1 frog. Leapfrog is flying as long as you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. Interesting ability, interesting card. I wish this had one more toughness, like a 3/2. That'd be great, but I understand why it's not. It's a common. That makes sense. But having a 3/1 have flying every single turn if you're just casting stuff on your turn is nice. It also will have flying on your opponent's turn if you cast an instant spell as well. So this is really good to be able to be like a surprise blocker against your opponent if they're not really realizing what Leapfrog does on their side of the field as well. So I like this card a lot for attacking and defending. Great at the 3-mana slot for most aggressive decks in blue. So pretty good for Draft and Seal. Again, kind of unplayable in Standard or anywhere else. Moving up, we've got Maximise Altitude, a blue mana sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying at the end of turn. Also has Jumpstart. This is a card that kind of will end the game for you if you have if you just need flying damage to go across. Very good for that. Also, Jumpstart means that your opponent might forget about it, but you won't, and you'll recast it in the middle or till the late part of a match. So very good there. So great for Draft and Sealed. Not going to see any kind of play anywhere else, perhaps. And the reason is that is because it's a sorcery speed, so you can only play it on your turn as a aggressive play, not a defensive play. Moving up, we've got Mission Briefing, a rare 2-mana instant, Surveil 2. Then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If you would cast this card from the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. You know, this is a card that might honestly be like the 5th Snapcaster Mage in your modern deck. Like, it's kind of in that slot where it's like it might be a 5th or 6th Snapcaster Mage in your control deck there. Very powerful. We'll definitely see some Standard play for sure in a control deck. We'll definitely see Draft and Seal play if you get into it. Just a great way to kind of recast a removal spell from your graveyard. Very good for that. As well as Digging for 2, because it also has Surveil for 2. You're losing the 2/1 body from Snapcaster Mage, but in a way, this is kind of a fixed Snapcaster Mage because the mana requirements are a little bit more strict, but you get to dig a little bit, throw those into the graveyard if you need to, and cast stuff from your graveyard this turn. So I really like this card a ton. Definitely will see a lot of play in probably Standard, Draft Sealed, and even Modern, of course. Moving on, we've got Murmuring Mystic, a 4-mana 1/5 human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue bird illusion creature token with flying. Very powerful here. Really like this in Draft and Sealed. Can possibly run away with the game if you have enough instant and sorcery spells to get this card going. In Standard, I kind of built this into a mono blue mill deck because it can just create you a lot of blockers or attackers if you want to do it that way. The problem with the Standard build is that it's 4 mana, so maybe in a Simic build, this could be a cool card for sure there. So we might want to wait on that to see how this card does in Standard, but I do think it's good for brewing. Definitely want to build something around it. I think creating 1/1 flyers, especially by just doing stuff, is super impactful to the board stage. So definitely going to see something in Draft Sealed, and I'll obviously see some brewing in Standard. Moving on, we've got Muse Drake, a 4-mana 1/3 Drake flying. When there's a battlefield, you draw a card. This card is okay in Draft and Sealed. It's card advantage, and it's also a 1/3 blocker in the air, which is quite good against a Boros deck or against a probably a Golgari deck. I think this card will probably see a lot of play in that particular format, but of course, because it's just a 1/3 for 4, not going to see any kind of Standard play whatsoever. It's just really good being able to get you card advantage and have a blocker on the field. Next up, we've got Necromoeba. This is a 2-mana rare 1/1 illusion. This is a reprint. Flying, when it is put into your graveyard from your library, you may put it onto the battlefield. So kind of a cool anti-mill card. Definitely working really well with the Surveil mechanic. I think this will probably see play in Standard. It is just a 2-mana 1/1, so I'm not really sure there. It's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a card that might see play. It's very strange for Standard. It's kind of slow, honestly. But, you know, being able to kind of have it onto the battlefield for free just by surveilling is very good too. So we'll see where this kind of lands in Standard. As far as a good card in Draft and in Sealed, most of the time it's just going to be a 2-mana 1/1 flyer, and that's kind of bad. This is really only good for like combo stuff and stuff like where you have a lot of things going on. And in Draft and Sealed, you really don't have that many things going on most of the time. So I feel like this is probably going to be a card you might want to pass up as your rare, if it's a pack 1 rare, pack 2 rare in Draft. But it's still like a 1/1 flyer for 2. So I think that's probably okay, but not fantastic. Moving up for us, we've got Night Vale Sprite, a 2-mana 1/2 Fairy Rogue Flyer. Whenever it attacks, you surveil for 1. Now, this is a card that I feel like is probably about the same as the Necromoeba here, but a little bit better in that you get to surveil every single time it attacks in. So you do have that 2 toughness as well, able to kind of trade with these 1/1s, which is nice. Also a flyer, so it can get in on turn 3 pretty easily without being like, blocked that often. And being able to surveil is really good because you're getting rid of like lands off the top if you have too many lands in your hand, or getting into some more gas and all that kind of stuff, or undergrowth into the graveyard as well. So really like this card for that. Think it's great for draft and sealed, and probably we'll see some standard play, some standard brewing around for sure. And side note, also love the art on this card. Great art as well. Next up, we've got Omnispell Adept, a 5-mana rare 3/4 human wizard. You can pay 3 and tap it. You can cast an instant or sorcery card from your hand without paying its mana cost. Super interesting. I think this is a judge ruling. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, and I'll definitely pin it on the top. But I think the judge ruling on this was that you could cast or sorcery cards at instant speed on your opponent's turn because of this card's ability here. So I think that's the case. If not, please let me know. That's kind of an iffy thing. That's definitely something that I need to reread as well. So I think I just heard that during the Loaded Ready run pre-release. But love the card art. Love the ability here for draft and sealed. Probably a little bit too slow for standard. Seems more like a commander card to me as far as what it's doing, being able to cast stuff without paying its mana cost over and over again. So very much of a commander card for sure. And yeah, 3/4 body for 5 is okay too in draft and in sealed. Moving on here, we've got Passwell Adept, a 2-mana 1/3 human wizard. You can pay 3, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Totally misunderstood this card whenever we first saw it in pre-release, or like the previews going on. Really love this card for drafted and sealed. Basically going to make one of your creatures unblockable every single turn if you have the mana to do so, which you probably will. So it's going to win you the game most of the time. And if they don't, or if you don't have the mana for it, it's just going to be a great 1/3 blocker for you as well. So not going to see any kind of standard play, but for draft and seal, this is a perfect way to get in attacks turn over turn. So perfect for that format. Very high pick for me as a common in blue. Next up, we've got Quasi Duplicate. This is a 3-mana sorcery rare. Create a token that's a copy of a target creature you control, and it also has Jumpstart. So first thing that comes to mind, of course, is Carnage Tyrant for standard, making a copy of Carnage Tyrant and then making a copy of Carnage Tyrant once again. That's ridiculous. Very, very powerful as a Simic deck here for sure. I do think, though, that in draft and in sealed, this card's just okay, not amazing, but not terrible in any way. I do think that this might pitch you into building a like Simic deck instead of into a Dimir deck or an Izzet deck, just based on how big the bodies are in the Simic lists, the green list for sure. So maybe we'll see that, maybe a Sultai list in draft and in sealed. I do think that, again, just like how all the Jumpstart cards are for draft and sealed, being able to cast the card again is what makes the card so powerful. Moving right along here, we have Radical Idea, a 2-mana instant draw card Jumpstart. This card's basically like a Think Twice, but you get to pitch a card from your hand into the graveyard. So I think it's going to be very good in a Sultai list in standard, maybe for brewing. Probably we'll see some play in draft and sealed, obviously, as a good way to get card advantage, just cycling a little bit. And that's about it as far as this card goes. I don't really know how this card will be in modern, anything older than that. Seems like Think Twice is just the better option there. But, throwing things into the graveyard could be a good idea in Sultai in modern for sure. So this is a card that definitely needs to be brewed around, and very powerful, though, potentially. For standard and modern. I do think for just draft and seal, though, this is just a card that's going to draw you a card. You're going to lose a card by drawing a card when you jumpstart it, though. So kind of okay, but not terrible. Next up, we have Selective Snare, an X and blue sorcery. Return X target creatures of the creature type of your choice to their owner's hand. So this is kind of a decent card against, again, just like how it's showing a Boros list or a Wizards list. Just made for draft and sealed for sure. I'm not going to see any kind of standard play, I don't think, of course, because it's a sorcery speed play, so kind of weird that way. But it can do a mass bounce if you have, say, like you're spending 4 mana, you're bouncing 3 different things. That's pretty powerful in draft and sealed. It might actually turn the table and win you the game for sure. Very good against the blue decks and the Dimir decks and the Izzet decks, and probably going to be pretty good against the Boros decks. But I don't think it's going to be that great against the Selesnya decks and against the Golgari decks. There's just not enough like single creature selection on those sides that makes me think that this card will be that great against those particular deck styles. So maybe a sideboard card, bring it in game 2 after you know what you're up against for sure in Drafted and Sealed. Next up, we've got Sinister Sabotage. This is a 3-mana and uncommon instant, counter target spell, Surveil for 1. Very powerful, going to see some standard play for sure. Might even see some modern play, honestly, based on the Surveil for 1 here, being able to pitch stuff in your graveyard. But more often than not, probably just going to see standard play and going to see a lot of draft and sealed play for sure as well. Giving you card selection after you're countering something is very, very good in every format. And I think this will see a ton of play in draft modern, not modern, draft limited like sealed and in standard. There we go. This is basically replacing Disallow in standard. Moving up, we've got Thoughtbound Phantasm, a 1 blue mana 2/2 Spirit Defender. When you Surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on the Phantasm. As long as the Phantasm has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it can attack as though it didn't have defenders. So a 1 mana 2/2 Defender that can turn into a 5/5 attacker. I really like this card. Talked about this during the previews. Really think this card is very powerful if you get into a Dimir list in Drafted and Sealed. Probably won't see any standard play just because of how it kind of has to build over turns. So it might just die before that happens, or it might just get removed because of certain removal spells like Assassin's Trophy in standard. But in Draft and Sealed, this guy can turn into a 5/5 bomb if you just Surveil a few times. And keep in mind, it's not Surveil like if your card says Surveil 2, it's not getting a counter for each Surveil 2, it's getting a counter every time you Surveil in general. So if you have a card that says Surveil 2, you only get 1 +1/+1 counter on it. So multiple Surveil triggers is what causes this to get counters on it. So I think that's still very good though for a 1-drop. A 1 mana 2/2 Defender is very good for blue. And I think this card is very powerful. I would just wish it had flying. It just feels like it would have flying based on the art, but sadly, it does not. Moving up, we've got Unexplained Disappearance, a 2-mana instant. Return target creature to its owner's hand. You can Surveil for 1. This is all right. This is fine. Kind of like Disperse for us, but giving us some card advantage with the Surveil mechanic here. This is going to be good for Draft and Sealed. Not going to see any kind of standard play, I don't believe, unless there's like a Surveil deck that kind of comes together in standard. But for now, this card's probably fine as a good card to kind of keep an opponent back for a turn or two while you continue to bash in for their life total in Draft and in Sealed. Moving up, we've got Vedalken Mesmerist, a 2-mana 2/1 Vedalken Wizard. Whenever the Mesmerist attacks, target creature an opponent controls gets -2, -0 until end of turn. This card's okay. It's not amazing. The issue here that I have is it doesn't weaken their toughness in any way. It just weakens their attack. So let's say that they have a 3/1 coming their way or on their side of the field. We're attacking in. They still trade because it's a 3/1, just being a 1/1 at that point. The 1 toughness on the Mesmerist here really makes this kind of bad for me. I wish this was a 2/2 attacking in, being able to get -2, -0, because that would make it a lot better as far as the card goes. But I think it's probably just a low draft pick for you, probably a 26, 27 slot pick for you in Draft and Sealed. And of course, not going to see any kind of standard play. Moving on here, we have Wall of Mist, good old faithful Wall of Mist, a 2-mana 0/5 Defender wall. This is fine. This is going to be seeing tons of play, of course, in Drafted and Sealed, being able to hold off those big creatures in Golgari and in doesn't have flying, of course, or reach or anything like that. So this is kind of a sad day for that. But being able to hold off some attacks for a couple turns is very good in Draft and Sealed while you build up your board state. So I like that card for this. Next up, we have Watcher in the Mist, a 5-mana 3/4 Spirit with flying. When it enters the battlefield, we get to Surveil for 2, which is very good. It's also just a 5-mana 3/4 for flying, and I'll take that any day of the week in Drafted and Sealed. Probably not going to see any kind of standard play. It's very strange. This is a spirit, and I see a skeleton in the art. I feel like it's like a skeleton spirit. Why not just have that as the creature type? That feels like it makes more sense, but oh well. I do think this card is quite powerful though in Draft and Sealed. A nice big bomb for you to be able to also give you card advantage as well. Next up, we've got Wishcoin Crab, a 4-mana 2/5 crab. That's a vanilla, and that's about it. Which is okay, I suppose. And that's going to do it actually for the blue cards here. Wow, what a way to end on an anticlimactic card. The crab's fine. You're gonna see it in Draft and Sealed, and you're probably gonna be like, this is fine because it's got 5 toughness, and you'll put it in your deck. It's basically Wall of Mist for 4 mana, but that's fine, I guess. Definitely not gonna see any kind of standard play. I like that there's a crab here. It's very, very on point. But that's going to do it for these colors, guys. As far as blue goes, let me know what you think of the best colors or best card in blue for this set. Like if you like it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll have more colors coming to you as the days pass for Guilds of Ravnica as we get closer and closer to the pre-release and the re-release of the main set for Guilds of Ravnica. Thank you so much, guys. I love you, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more awesome MTG content just like this, and make sure to tap the bell icon to be notified whenever a video is made live. If you want to keep watching content, here are 2 more videos for you. This video and many others are sponsored by MTGO Traders and Cape Fear Games. Buy and sell digital singles to build your online collection today with MTGO Traders, and get your paper singles, accessories, and much more from Cape Fear Games. Whatever your Magic needs, both places have you covered.